The Royals got walked off in the Bronx, but it had all the feels of a great October game. We'll dive into it next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. So go get started today at Gametime. I'll be honest with everybody here, and I am recording this minutes after the Royals just got walked off in the series finale against the New York Yankees in the Bronx. The honest part for me, I'm not mad one bit. I would like to sit here and vent all these frustrations that maybe some of you are having out there. I can't get too worked up about a game like this. Not that it's not important. We all knew how important this game was. But other than the poor hitting with runners in scoring position, what can I say was the main cause for losing to a really good team? I went into tonight already knowing that the Royals had done what I'd hoped they'd do in New York, which was take one. I could stomach 9-11 in that 20-game stretch of the Gauntlet Part 2. And tonight going into the game, they were 9-10. Best case scenario, they walk out 500. Worst case, as we saw, they leave 9-11. And yes, all the teams that were chasing them won tonight. So it gets a little bit tighter, but still 15 games to go and a lot of ground to make up with the Royals heading to Pittsburgh next. Then they're going to be hosting the Tigers, and they could put away the Tigers at Kauffman Stadium themselves. They'll see the Giants. Then they're going to see the Nationals and the Braves to close out the year. But tonight, I just can't sit here and wallow in self-pity. I can't, sit here tonight and be depressed because I really don't think there's much to be depressed about. The Yankees did better tonight than the Royals. The Royals had a lead, a slim one at that, and the Royals had a chance to close out that game late. But let's start it off way at the beginning. The Royals are facing Luis Gil, who's one of the Yankees' best starters. They could have cashed in the first inning. They didn't get it done. Didn't matter for Cole Reagans. He dealt all night long and had one bad pitch to an MVP caliber hitter in Juan Soto. He missed there. He would tell you he missed there. You can't miss to a guy like that. But getting beat by Juan Soto is something that I can stomach. You'll hear me say the word stomach a lot in this recap. I can sit here and be fine with it because Juan Soto is a generational talent. You get beat by DJ LeMahieu, who's on the injured list, but for the sake of this argument, yeah, I'm feeling a little different. It's not DJ LeMahieu who won a batting title. It is the long past prime DJ LeMahieu. Or if you get beat by Alex Verdugo in a spot like that, I don't feel as good about it. But Juan Soto did what Juan Soto does. And Cole Reagans missed the spot, okay. But then the Royals immediately respond and tie that game up. And it's just back and forth, a battle of the bullpens. Q goes to Lucas Erceg early, who was just breathing fire out of the bullpen. He goes through the teeth of the Yankees lineup. He strikes out Soto. He gives up the hit to Aaron Judge, but then punches out Jazz Chisholm on 100 on the knuckles, basically. If he would have swung, it would have been 100 on the knuckles. But to me, I just love the way that the bullpen was managed after Cole Reagans leaves the game in the sixth, or at the conclusion of the sixth inning. Sam Long comes in, wasn't the greatest, but Salvador Perez made one hell of a play, one of the best defensive plays the Royals have had all season long, and basically creating a double play by himself, tagging out a guy like, Volpe that had hit that, Somebody toward the bottom of the Yankees order taps one, and he's able to throw out. Maybe it was Volpe running to the plate. I can't remember who hit that ball, but it was a great play. He picks it, tags the runner out at first, and then fires a strike to Freddie Fermin, who lays the tag down on Volpe. That kept the game tied. So I'm loving the defensive web gems the Royals are making. Lucas Ursig was great in extras. The Royals going into extras take the lead, thanks to Dairon Blanco putting matters into his own hands. After Bobby Witt Jr. strikes out, he swipes third and comes home to score on a wild pitch. So Chris Bubic comes in because Matt Quatraro doesn't want Lucas Ursig throwing more than 30 pitches to win a game in September, right? It's all about winning games in October. And Chris Bubic comes in. What do I have to complain about with Chris Bubic? The first guy, it was Cabrera, bunts off him. Yeah, he could have made a diving play to maybe double off the runner at second, but Maikel Garcia makes the play. And then he gets, it was Austin Wells to pop up to left field. And MJ Melendez didn't make a great throw, but on a play like that, you probably have to have an absolute strike there. And didn't get it done. Chris Bubic gets out of that inning. And then I would say the only part I'll complain about is the top of the 11th, in which Michael Massey doesn't do his job and get the runner over to third. Paul DeJong is doing what Paul DeJong did a lot for the White Sox, and which is strike out. And then Maikel Garcia, a really bad at bat, and he had a bad night. But there's 2 outs in the inning, and at that point, you got to think the RBI chance is pretty low against a guy like Luke Weaver, who once was a Royal, but does not look anything like what he did with the Kansas City Royals. So that game in total is not one where I feel like they gave it away. They went toe-to-toe with the best team in the American League, and in the end, it came down to a battle of the bullpens and which team could drive in the runs. And also, that bottom of the 11th inning, again, what do I have to complain about with Chris Bubic? Chris Bubic got Juan Soto to weakly ground out, and it was with 2 strikes. It was a good pitch on 2 strikes. Juan Soto just rolled one over to second base. He did his job where Michael Massey couldn't in the top of that inning. And then you walk Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge steals second. It's lefty on lefty with Jazz Chisholm. I think that, you could have walked him to set up a double play ball at any single base, but Giancarlo Stanton's on deck and facing a lefty. So do you want to be beaten by Giancarlo Stanton there, or do you want to take your chances that Jazz Chisholm, who struck out a lot this year, gets fooled by Chris Bubic's changeup? And the ball that he hit, the infield's drawn in. Bobby Witt Jr. made a hell of a stop. Impossible to make that throw. So no complaints for Chris Bubic. He did his job. He didn't get lit up. He didn't really have bad pitches. He didn't miss a spot. Just a little bit unlucky there. And the Royals leave the Bronx, only taking 1 in that series, but I kind of expected them just to take 1 in that series. Now you get another off day where you can rest up again. You're going to Pittsburgh, so it's not that typical off day, right? Where you can have a breather and you're in Kansas City, you get to sleep in your own bed, wake up, have the off day, and go to bed that night in Kansas City. They are going from New York to Pittsburgh, and they'll see the Pirates over the weekend, a Pirates team that has shut down Paul Skeens for the year, so they won't see Paul Skeens, and a Pirates team that has completely fallen out of it here in the second half. But you got through the gauntlet. And if I would have told you after that 7th straight loss and the second consecutive loss to the Guardians at home to open up that series, if I would have told you they'll finish 9-11, I think everybody would have taken it. I think everybody would have taken it. And I don't believe there were a lot of games that were left on the table. I think that's the best way to put it. If the Royals blew tonight's game 5-0 and the Yankees storm back and Lucas Ursig gets knocked around a little bit, I think I'm a little bit more chippy in tonight's podcast episode. I'm a little bit more frustrated. But what game did they leave on the table? If you want to tell me that Monday night was a game they left on the table, I would just disagree with you. That's a 1-run lead you're trying to protect. You need 12 outs and you don't have your best bullpen arm out there. That to me is not leaving anything on the table. That's you rolling the dice and hoping that the guys that you're putting out there have their best stuff, and James McArthur did. Tonight, they did not leave anything on the table by blowing a 1-0 lead or blowing a 3-2 lead in extra innings when you have the ghost runner rule. No, I can't get too upset about tonight's game. If anything, this got me even more fired up for October because that was a playoff game. And even though there was only 40,000 at Yankee Stadium, it felt like a playoff atmosphere. The crowd was getting into it. The Royals were stepping up to the moment, not so much with runners in scoring position, but I can only imagine what that place will look like when they're waving towels and it's loud on every single pitch. If the Royals are there, look, I think the Yankees go home tonight going, if we see them again, we're going to have to be far more prepared for Cole Reagan, Seth Lugo, and Michael Wacha than maybe we thought we would have had to be. I can't walk away from a series against a really good team like this and be feeling depressed about it. I just can't. I feel really good about where this team is at. Yeah, I understand Minnesota won and the Boston Red Sox won and Seattle's playing right now and Detroit won. And yes, those teams will have a chance to gain even more ground tomorrow with the Royals not playing, but there's 15 games to go. And they're going to have to keep up that great play, and the Royals will have to bottom out against some teams they should be able to beat. So we'll see what happens. We'll preview that Pirate series coming up here in about, 10 to 15 minutes or so. But we'll take our first break here. When we come back, let's go over some bullpen power rankings, who I think Matt Quatraro will trust the most come October. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today and our title sponsor in Gametime. Now, the Royals will be heading to Pittsburgh to take on the Pirates, though I did see some Royals fans, and they had messaged me about being out there at Yankee Stadium, some really cool pictures that you guys took, and some great play-by-play tweets that I saw as well. And I don't know where you got your tickets, whether they be through a family friend, or you got them yourselves. But if you're thinking about going to the game in Pittsburgh, or you're thinking about waiting until they come back home to Kauffman Stadium, buy your tickets over at Gametime. It's where I go to buy my tickets. I know that KU will be hosting UNLV coming up on Friday. K-State will be hosting Arizona. Mizzou will be hosting Boston College. You want to go to those games, head over to Gametime. Or if you're going to the Chiefs game on Sunday, might as well go over to Gametime and see what deals they got there. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On MLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Again, that is Locked On MLB, LOCKEDONLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is game time. Well, I think we got a very good sneak peek, I guess I would say, about how Matt Quatraro would handle a playoff scenario. I was really waiting to see when that game would happen. And I expected it to be in this final month of the year. I expected there to be a really good opponent in the Gauntlet series where maybe the Royals were on the road, maybe they weren't. And Matt Quatraro would be tested to manage his bullpen as if all of those guys were fresh. And the good thing about tonight's game and why Matt Quatraro was able to handle it that way was because they have an off day. You were able to use Lucas Erceg for 2 innings. You were able to use Kris Bubic for 2 innings. And I think tonight what it showed to me was that there is a easy number one. We all know it's Lucas Erceg. If you can get Lucas Erceg the ball in the 8th or 9th inning and you've got a 1 or a 2 run lead, you feel good about your chances. If Lucas Erceg has to come in the 7th inning in a playoff game, let's paint the picture tonight that this was basically an elimination game. Yankees won game 1. Seth Lugo deals in game 2. And your game 3 starter would be Michael Wacha and not Cole Reagan. But for the sake of this hypothetical, let's go along with it. And you get 6 innings from Michael Wacha, and this game is tied. And the Yankees bullpen is pitching well. Luis Gil is looking good, or whoever they'd be throwing in a spot like that. Maybe it's Marcus Stroman. And you got the top of the order coming up. And we've known this about Matt Quatraro, and you can just bookmark this, and you should know this moving forward. If the 8th inning is bringing up the best part of that team's lineup and Lucas Erceg is fresh, he is going in. There is no doubt about it. He is going in. If there is a playoff scenario in which he gets through that part of the order and he's only thrown 15 to 20 pitches, he will go back out in the 9th. And I think that we saw that front and center tonight. If that game goes into extras, the next man up, the number 2 on my chart, is Kris Bubic. It is not close anymore. It is Erceg. It is Bubic. It is a large gap between number 2 and number 3. In a perfect scenario in a playoff game, Matt Quatraro would be able to go his starter for 7 innings. Again, this is a perfect scenario. Chris Bubich for the 8th, Lucas Erceg for the 9th. That would be his dream scenario. It's not always going to go that way because the playoffs are different, the lights are brighter, the crowds are louder. And there's going to be great lineups they're facing. And their guys aren't going to always have their A game out there. And that goes for the bullpen. But I get to the number 3 spot. I think number 3 is Sam Long. Again, it's a pretty big gap between Chris Bubich and Sam Long. But Sam Long was out there tonight, and it was more so about matchups at that point. And he didn't pitch that well tonight and got bailed out by a great play from Salvador Perez. But Sam Long's number 3. Number 4 is John Schreiber. Now, let me be very clear about this. If Lucas Erceg and Chris Bubich throw and that game goes into extras, like for instance, if Chris Bubich gets out of that 11th inning jam, the guy getting the ball in the 12th, if the Royals took the lead, or maybe they don't, would be John Schreiber. John Schreiber has closing experience where Sam Long has 1 save, I believe, and it was against the White Sox. You ain't seeing the 114-loss White Sox in October. So John Schreiber would get the call over Sam Long, but Sam Long's higher on the power rankings for me. And then you get to the number 5 spot, and to me, this is where it can get a little bit interesting because there are newer guys in this bullpen that have been pitching well of late and not new to the organization. They weren't acquired at the deadline or anything like that. But to me, I think number 5 on this list, just taking the hot hand, would be Daniel Lynch. I put Daniel Lynch very, very slightly over James McArthur, who I've got number 6 here. That's not going to be a popular pick for a lot of people. Maybe you got James McArthur at the very bottom of your power rankings, but I'm not there yet. To me, it would go Daniel Lynch because of the hot hand, and I think he's looked much better. Hasn't allowed a run since coming back up from Omaha. And James McArthur, I think, would have a similar role to Daniel Lynch in the postseason, where if the game is not out of hand, but if it's a 3-run game and you're down, you need a couple innings, that's who would be going in. Then the 7th guy would be Carlos Hernandez. I like the stuff. He's just not high leverage. And then the last spot would be Chris Stratton. But that's the bullpen rankings right now. That's the regular season. That's going to change in the postseason. I do not believe that Chris Stratton will be on the postseason roster. So you don't need to worry about DFAing, anything like that. I do not believe he's going to be on the postseason roster. I think Michael Lorenzen will. I think that Alec Marsh will. I think that Brady Singer will. And those guys will all go to the bullpen. And Carlos Hernandez and Chris Stratton and maybe one other guy won't be on there. Who knows? Maybe it isn't, James McArthur on that, or it is James McArthur, being left off that postseason roster. To me, though, I think we are starting to see a better outline about who Matt Quatraro wants to go to. And regardless of matchups, I think there are 2 guys that he will go to, regardless if it's righty or lefty, and that's Erceg and Chris Bubich. Everybody else in that bullpen is based off matchups. And that's why you're hoping in a best-of-3 wildcard series, you're not having to go to your bullpen in the 3rd inning or the 4th inning. But there may be a point in time when that happens, when you have to rely on some of those guys giving you some big innings, some big outs in October, when it's colder, when you're on the road. And right now, the Royals would be going on the road to Baltimore for a best-of-3 series. Maybe you consider that a better matchup than what the Yankees are, but I also thought that they held their own in this series. This was much different than the Royals-Yankees series we saw at Kauffman Stadium back in June. There are better options in the bullpen than that series. There were better starting options in that series. Remember, the Royals had to open with Dan Altavilla in one of those games. They had Seth Lugo for one of them. And they got a much different Seth Lugo on Tuesday night. But I think we are seeing what this bullpen is going to look like in October, how it's going to be utilized in October. Tonight, to me, was a sneak peek. I think if there's a scenario that it's a tie game or the Royals have a 1-run lead, you might be counting on Lucas Erceg to give you 6 outs. Yeah, it would have been awesome if Hunter Harvey came to Kansas City and was just this fire-breathing dragon in the 8th inning, so you didn't have to go to Erceg so early, but that's not the or those aren't the cards you've been dealt. This is a different bullpen, and Chris Bubich is that guy that you're having to rely on. So we'll see. Maybe some other things will change and some things will happen over the final 15 games, but that's where I got my bullpen power rankings at this point in time. We're going to take our final break of the show, but before we do that, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast as host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up next, we're going to preview this series at PNC Park against the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor in PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Now, PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your picks still live in their system. Now, with PrizePicks, you can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. As we had mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the gauntlet, or the second gauntlet, is now over. The Royals went 9-11 in those 20 games. And now you look at the final stretch of the season and who the Royals are going to get. They will get 3 in Pittsburgh against a sub-500 Pirates team. They'll return home for their final homestand of 2024, at least in the regular season, assuming they can hang on and go to October for the postseason. They'll see the Tigers for 3, the Giants for 3, who were sub-500. Then they will have an off day on Monday, the 23rd. Then they will embark on a 6-game road trip where they will see the Nationals sub-500 for 3, and the Atlanta Braves, who are trying to hang on to a wild card spot for 3 to close out the year on the 27th, the 28th, and the 29th. So that really brutal stretch of play, it is now over, and the Royals get 3 against a not very good team, a last-place team at that, a Tigers team who they've got their number. The Royals have the Tigers number, that is, and a Giants team that has fallen out of it and likely will be playing the younger players at that point for the final 3 games at Kauffman Stadium in the regular season. A Nationals team that is committed to playing the young players, and a Braves team that might give you a very serious fight depending on their playoff odds in the final series of the year. But let's kick things off with this series at PNC Park. I believe it's one of, if not the most gorgeous ballparks in all of baseball. To me, I think number 1 is Oracle Park in San Francisco. I've had the chance to be there in person. Haven't had the chance to go and see PNC Park. That absolutely is on a bucket list item, or on my bucket list as an item, but not going to be able to make it down this coming weekend. Simply don't have the funds and just have too much going on at work to catch a series like this. But would have been a lot of fun because that backdrop really goes unrivaled in all of baseball. And I think Pirates fans know that, and I think all of baseball fans know that. But on Friday night, after their off day on Thursday, it should be Alec Marsh going in this game, if I'm not mistaken, because tonight was Cole Reagan's, and the last time Cole Reagan's had thrown, yes, Alec Marsh will be lined up to go on Friday. The Royals list him as TBD for Friday, but I think that's been that way the last couple of starts for Alec Marsh, because maybe they don't know if Michael Lorenzen will be able to make that start. I envision that it will be Alec Marsh on Friday, and the Royals will face Luis Ortiz, a 25-year-old who's had a very good year in 2024, his 3rd year at the big league level. This one by far and away his best. 34 games this year, but only 12 starts. He's got a 3.26 ERA, 90 strikeouts, and 118 2/3 innings. His whip is below the league average at 1.11. And in his last 7 starts, a little bit higher than what he's been averaging this year, a 4.28 ERA in his last 7 starts. But you go over His last 15 games, which includes 12 starts, he's got a 3.57 ERA. And I look at the last 3 outings, 2 of them, he threw 6 shutout innings. He had 6 shutout against the Reds on August 25th. And then on August 31st, he threw 6 shutout innings, allowed only 1 hit against the Cleveland Guardians. And then on the 7th against the Nationals, he went 5 2/3 and gave up only 3 earned runs. So the Royals might have their hands full a little bit with Luis L. Ortiz on Friday. Alec Marsh will be the counterpart for Kansas City. First pitch in that game a little bit earlier than you're used to on Friday. It'll be a 5:40 first pitch Central Time. If you're watching on the East Coast, of course, that would be 6:40. I'm not going to go through all the time zones because, quite honestly, I don't know what all the times are going to look like in different time zones for that Friday night game. On Saturday, it will be an earlier game. This will be a 12:05 first pitch. If Alec Marsh is going in that game, it would line up Michael Wacha to be the starter on Saturday afternoon. And the Royals will have to go up against Mitch Keller in this game. Before Paul Skeens was the ace of the Pirates, and he's had a very good 2024 as well. Maybe not as good as the Pirates thought he could have had. The Royals saw him, I believe, 2 years ago, it would have been when the Royals were in Pittsburgh. It might have been 3 years ago now that I think about it. He's been around a little bit longer than you would have expected. Made his debut back in 2019. Think he was a top pitching prospect as well, but a 3.85 ERA and 28 starts this year. In his last 7 outings, though, he has been roughed up a little bit, an ERA near 6 at 5.86. He's 1-4 in those 7 starts. In his last 15 starts, he's 3-6 with a 4.50 ERA. Did have a quality start last time out against Washington and giving up just 2 runs on 7 hits in 6 innings. But against the Guardians on September 1st, he was not working that deep into the game. 5 1/3, but gave up 11 hits, just 3 earned runs. So the Guardians really didn't break through off of him, but 11 hits in that game against the Guardians lineup. So a very hittable arm that the Royals will be facing on Saturday, and a pitcher that some of the team does have experience against. And then on Sunday, it should be, again, Brady Singer lined up to throw on that Sunday afternoon game. Like I said, TBD is listed for the Royals in all 3 starts for this series. Maybe Michael Lorenzen makes one of them. I think the Royals were hopeful that he would return to the rotation, or at least return to the roster this weekend in Pittsburgh. But whoever will be starting on Sunday, my guess is it'll be Brady Singer. They're going to have to go up against the flamethrower in Jared Jones, another guy that alongside Paul Skeens has been somebody they can build around. The 23-year-old struck out 115 in the 108 1/3 innings this year, a 3.82 ERA in 19 games, though has kind of fallen off in the second half a little bit. Was really good last time out against Washington and was pretty good at Wrigley Field against the Cubs, but wasn't that good against the Cubs when they came to Pittsburgh to face off against each other. But somebody in the first half that before Paul Skeens got there, this is who you were talking about. If you were a Pirates fan, you were talking about the future of this rotation being led by Jared Jones, or at least Jared Jones being a number 2 and Paul Skeens being a number 1. But the Royals will dodge Paul Skeens in this series. They'll have to wait until next year for a potential matchup, though that would be at Kauffman Stadium. Jared Jones has electric stuff. Absolutely electric stuff. And if the Royals, look like they did tonight with runners in scoring position 0 for 11, these are 3 Pirates pitchers that can give you a lot of troubles. The good news for the Royals, it's not really a lineup that's going to strike a lot of fear in you, but the Royals also don't have Cole Reagans or Seth Lugo going in this series. So it can't be an opponent you look over because of the record. They're only 70 and 76. So don't take this as they're 54 and 90 or anything like that. This is a Pirates team that in the first half was absolutely in the wild card hunt. And if it wasn't for a 10-game losing streak in the second half, they might still be in the hunt in the National League wild card picture. But the Royals will be there for 3 games before coming back home to take on the Detroit Tigers and the San Francisco Giants at Kauffman Stadium for the final homestand of the regular season. Hopefully there will be more home games come October. That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast and prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to do another episode on MJ Melendez and how the Royals should handle him to close out this year and hopefully into the postseason, and maybe even a deep dive into what should they do with MJ Melendez next year. That'll be our lead segment tomorrow, and I'll leave it at that. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.